Hello, my name is Professor John Benjamin, and this is game design. And so we're leaving off from the last episode. As you can see here on the computer, we're still in the first-person template, and we're going to learn how to manipulate some objects here. Okay, so let's start by. So let's go ahead and drag a new actor onto the stage, and we will learn how to manipulate it. So here are the basic actors. So we've got an empty actor and a point light, cube, sphere, cylinder. There are light actors. Here are some basic ones. Cinematic actors, these are tools, camera rigs that you use for cutscenes. There's visual effects actors. Geometry actors, so these are very important. These are also known as brushes. So geometry brushes are for prototyping. As I mentioned before, game design is an iterative process. So you want to get up and started as quickly and with the least amount of effort and cost that you can. And so we use these brushes to just kind of create a stage, if you will, to start testing out the game at an early part of the process. And so we use geometry brushes to do that. We can manipulate them. They really require a little less processing power. And then once things are set up as you would like, then you just go ahead and replace them with a 3D model that you built in something like Maya or Blender. And so these are very important actors that we'll use quite a lot. And then there's volumes. These are a whole bunch of interesting things like buttons and collisions that we'll talk about later. And then there's all classes. The really important thing to be noting here, again, I think I mentioned this, is each of the panels has a search. And the fastest way to get to what you want is just simply type in, let's say, cube. Cube. And then you'll get to the cube. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and drag a cube out here onto my level. And there's a pink cube. I just have had that set as default. But I can simply change it to a basic material. All right, and I'll hit X here. Okay, so how do we manipulate this little object here? If you select it with your mouse, typically it'll start with the position arrows. And so you've got X, Y, and Z. So you can simply click on those arrows and then move that box around the space. Note that there's these strange little bars here. So what these will do is if I want to manipulate the location of the box just within two axes, I can click on one of those little connector bars. So here I can move these axes or just these. This is a great one too, especially if it's snapped to the floor and I just want to move it along the floor. And so on and so forth. Okay. Now let's go ahead and look for the key commands for these. So the first one to change location, and let's take a look here over in our transform tool. Now here, there's a very important thing to notice too. As I mentioned before, naming is really important. So we're going to call this John's cube. So I have cube selected, and or I'm going to call it, let's say, home cube. And I'll use camel case, so rather than spaces. All right, so now I know this is my home cube, and I can distinguish it easily in the world outliner from among the other cubes. All right, so if I hit the W key, it takes me here to the location tool. And of course, if I have a precise measurement of the location, I can type it in here, or I can scrub these values like so. But now notice, if I move the values in the details panel, there is this little yellow icon here that I can click on, and that will set everything to 0. Now it's setting it to 0 within my level, and so that is 0, 0, 0 in my level. That puts it below the floor here. So I'm just going to go ahead and move it back up so we can see it, but that's what that does. So then I can, of course, scrub rotate it, and then I can set it back to the way it was, and then I can scrub scale it. I can scale it all together with the little lock here, or I can unlock it and then just scale one side of it, or one dimension, I should say, like so. I'm making a little wall here. Okay, now if I want to scale or rotate using the tools, I can just use my key commands, and I can hit E for rotate and R for scale, and then again W for position. So there's position. So I'm going to hit E to go to rotate, and then you can rotate on all of these different axes. Again, or go back to the little yellow arrow here and reset it, as so. And then try going to hitting R, and then I can scale like this by using the different axes. All right, and again, you can move that wall around, or you can manipulate it there. Okay, and that's how you manipulate actors. All right, a couple other things about manipulating them. We'll talk about snapping here in a moment. So let's talk about snapping. So right now I am snapping because I have this snapping to the grid, because I have the grid snapping activated right here. Now if you don't see these, you can simply hit Control-Shift-T, and that's a toggle, Control-Shift-T, that turns on and off these controllers. If you're on a Mac, it's probably Command-Shift-T or Option-Shift-T. All right, so the first one I'm going to look at here is the world versus object outliner or view. And so right now here I'm in world view, but now watch if I go ahead and hit E and I rotate this wall or my home cube, and then I go back to my move tool, notice that the arrows are aligned with the world. This is really important. Let's say I want this wall to be exactly at a 45-degree angle, but I want to change its position based on the other objects, based on the world. So it'll be in the world outliner. So then if I switch that, though, you can see now the arrows are aligned to the object. So this is object space versus world space. So here's world space, and here's object space. All right, pretty easy. Okay. All right, now let's talk about snapping. Back the way it was, there it is. Okay, and you can have your wall or your cube in any way. I'm going to change this name now. I'm just going to call it home wall. Again, give it an appropriate name that's intuitive. So the first snapping we have here is the grid. So you can't see the grid really well right here. But if I move up here into the atmosphere, you can see it's down there. All right, there's my grid. And right now, this wall is snapping to the grid and at increments of 10. So if I go a little closer, you can see here, you can see how it's snapping. So if I wanted to change those increments to something finer, I could, or something bigger. You'll see something really, if you turn it up to 100, you can see those are really big increments. All right, and that's pretty helpful. I think you'll notice that 10 is pretty much the best way to go. All right, and let's take a look at rotation. It does the same thing. We can rotation snap. I'm going to hit the E key, and here I'm snapping at 10 degrees, you can see, and I can change that from 10 to 45, and then I'm only going at 45-degree angles in my rotation. Or I can go down to 5. But I find 10 to be a really easy one to work with. And then you toggle on and off the snapping right here. And then again, now I can rotate it at very, very small degrees. Okay, I'm going to keep that on. And then now here is scale snapping. So scale snapping on, if I hit R and I go to scale, you can see there's a little bump. It's snapping to increments of 0.25. Okay, and note that in Unreal Engine, 1 unit equals 1 centimeter in the real world. That's good to keep in mind. All right, and the last one up here that I want to look at is camera speed. So camera speed is simply the speed of how your camera moves with regard to your mouse. So right now, 4 is a good one. If I moved it really fast, and then I go ahead and I left-click to zoom in and out, you can see it zooms really quickly. So that's my camera speed. I'll keep that at 4. All right, that's a pretty good speed. Okay, and that's all for this lecture. Hope to see you next time.